But now we're going to welcome the Premier of Nevis, Honorable Mark Brantley. Please, a round of applause for him. He'll be taking us further.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me, of course, greet our Prime Minister, His Excellency Dr. Terence Drew, and our host, Ms. Minor, for an excellent hospitality that has been displayed so far. I am delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be here as the Premier of Nevis. St. Kitts and Nevis has an unusual constitutional construct which gives us a Prime Minister and a Premier, and which allows us to have a Prime Minister on one side and a Premier and Leader of the Opposition on the other side. I think, however, that what is important is that he has invited me to be here with him. I thank him publicly for that, and he has given me the opportunity to work with him. Give me the opportunity to work with him on matters that we think are of critical national importance. Today I've been tasked with the responsibility of speaking to you about geothermal energy that we are trying to harness in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. But before I do that, let me say that's the first time that I have come to Nigeria. I want to thank you so far for the excellent hospitality. But my story of Africa is an interesting and maybe a funny story. Some years ago, when I was foreign minister, I visited Morocco. And I was so proud and pleased to finally be in the motherland. And so I said to a woman who was there, who was from Senegal, that I felt very pleased, very humbled. I felt a spiritual connection because I was finally in Africa. And she turned to me and she says, "My friend, this is not Africa. You are in Morocco." And I thought that was quite an interesting observation. But when I landed here, one of the gentlemen who met us at the plane said, "Welcome to the real Africa." So thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to be in Africa. And just so you know, my daughter, one of my daughters, studied in London. And she had many Nigerian friends. And so when I told her I was coming, she said, "Make sure to have jollof rice." And I had jollof rice today. And I should tell you that before lunch, I was able to button my jacket, but now with jollof rice, I'm not so sure it's fitting properly. But enough of that fun, and let's move to the geothermal project. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Nevis has known for the past 2 decades that we had large deposits of geothermal energy available on the island. As you've heard, geothermal energy really comes about because of the volcano's heat that's generated in the Earth's crust. That comes up as steam, it turns turbines, it's translated into water. That water is pumped back into the Earth's crust, and so it's a continuous cycle. That's a closed-loop system that we propose to use. Now, why is this of particular relevance? It's of particular relevance because St. Kitts and Nevis as a federation, as you've heard, we only have about 52,000 people. Prime Minister brought a delegation of about 14, so 52,000 minus 14, that's the population that's there now. But we have tremendous potential, and I think it's interesting that I asked our hosts, are we the first Caribbean country that you've done this with? And she said yes. So she started with the smallest of the Caribbean countries, but I think the smallest, as the Bible tells us, a child shall lead them, and so the smallest, I think, shall show the way for the rest of the region and the rest of the world in terms of what we're capable of doing. Now, our economy in St. Kitts and Nevis is heavily service-oriented. We are excellent, and I'm happy that the previous speaker spoke to our skill set in terms of tourism. We are the birthplace of hospitality. If you were here and you heard the speech made by the Prime Minister, he said that the first hotel in the entire region was built on the island of Nevis, the famous bath hotels. And we are told that royalty from around the world came there to take their baths. I hope I'm not impolitic when I say that that might be, for some from Europe, the only bath that they took for the year. They did it in Nevis. And so we're grateful to have them. They came. For those who were diseased, those who had difficulties, they took their baths in Nevis, and we cured scurvy, we cured arthritis, we cured various things there. So we were part of that therapeutic European model of hospitality. And that hotel still exists, although it's not functioning as a hotel. So we've had years of hospitality. And after the sugar industry in St. Kitts, which had dominated the landscape for quite some time, was finally abandoned, St. Kitts as well got into tourism as a mainstay. Followed, and you will hear more about that in due course, by our Citizenship by Investment program, which incidentally, and I must say this on this forum, was pioneered by St. Kitts and Nevis. The very first iteration of that program was done way back in 1984, and it was our gift to the world. We now see other nations across the world duplicating it, providing different versions of it, but the idea of leveraging citizenship for investment was born in St. Kitts and Nevis. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, we have been very dependent on tourism and very dependent on citizenship by investment. And we realized during the COVID pandemic, when ports were closed, airports were closed, hotels were closed, that our people suffered. And so it became an imperative for us to seek to diversify the local economy. Consistent with that, of course, is our commitment to the global fight against climate change and the commitments that we've made to the global community in relation to that fight. Incidentally, like many of you here in Africa, those of us in the Caribbean find ourselves on the front lines of this fight against climate change. It's a war that we did not start. It's a war to which we have not contributed. But unfortunately, we find ourselves as the chief victims of that change that we're seeing in our climate. And so we came up with this idea of this initiative. As we said, we've known that we had the resource now for 20 years. And many of you sitting there may say, well, if you've known you've had the resource for 20 years, why it is you have not exploited it? And the simple answer is that this type of exploration is expensive, the upfront costs are high, and we were unable for a very long time to raise the capital. A second point that I must also make is that I do not believe that we had the national political will to make this project a reality. I again thank the Honorable Prime Minister, because in the first week that he became Prime Minister, he knew I was going to sit across the aisle from him. He knew I was not going to agree with many of the things that he wanted to say and do. But in our very first meeting, we agreed, he and I, that we will sing, as we say colloquially, from the same hymnal. We'll be in the same pew, in the same church, singing the same hymn on this issue of renewable energy for St. Kitts and Nevis. And so when he got elected, we for the very first time had the political will at a national level to exploit this resource for the benefit not only of the island of Nevis, where it is located, but for the entire Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. To put it in context for you, ladies and gentlemen, we are told currently by our service providers, our electricity utility service providers, that St. Kitts and Nevis combined at peak is only about 50 megawatts of power in terms of consumption. Small population, relatively small consumption. So that you have an understanding of where this project can potentially take us, is that the scientists are telling us that we have something close to 1,000 megawatts of available geothermal power, or 1 gigawatt, I think that translates into. So if you figure that 50 megawatts is all that we need currently at peak, then having almost 1,000 megawatts of available power means that we overnight become a significant supplier of energy. And so we see that we can transform lives and transform our economy and transform the entire landscape of St. Kitts and Nevis by shifting us from our near 100% dependence we currently have on fossil fuel energy and moving towards renewable energy, and in this case, geothermal energy. Nigeria has oil. We have geothermal. Some countries have gold. We have geothermal. Some have timber and diamonds. We have geothermal. And so notwithstanding that we're a small island, God has blessed us with this resource, and it is therefore now for us to harness it and to move it forward. Now these slides that you're seeing, not in any particular order, the team sent them to me and I said they were quite technical, but I'll ask the media people just to allow them to flow across the screen so you can take from them what you will. But what these slides show is that we have developed now a joint project, a national project, a project that will see in the future St. Kitts and Nevis electrified by geothermal energy. Incidentally, ladies and gentlemen, St. Kitts and Nevis is again uniquely blessed. There are many multi-state, multi-island states in the Caribbean. You may have heard of Trinidad and Tobago. You may have heard of the Bahamas, Antigua, Barbuda, Grenada, Carriacou, Petit Martinique, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But what we have that many of those do not have is our proximity. St. Kitts and Nevis is only 2 miles at its closest point. In fact, this weekend, I'm going to miss it since I'm here in Abuja with you, but this weekend is actually a swim from the island of Nevis to the island of St. Kitts. And some 500 participants from all around the world are going to be there swimming from one island to the next. I assure you, had I been at home, I would also have been on the swim, but I would have been in a boat accompanying those who are swimming the 2 miles. But it is an annual event, and because we're so close to each other, it allows us to bridge through undersea cables that power grid. And what we're therefore moving towards, working the 2 utility companies, one in Nevis, Nevlec, the other in Nevis, Skelec, we're moving towards a national grid. A national grid which will have redundancies built in and allows us to supply from Nevis the entire country with renewable energy. Now the reason, again, let me go back to the point I made about having much more energy than we can use. All of the formulas that we have seen tell us that this energy from geothermal is likely to be less than 12 US cents per kilowatt hour. Why is that important? That's important because currently our diesel-powered energy sometimes costs as much as 40 cents US per kilowatt hour. We pay a huge amount for electricity in St. Kitts and Nevis. Large electricity prices, significant electricity prices means that there's less opportunity to do business. We know many small businesses, that's one of their significant costs, the cost of power. And so by moving to geothermal, by moving to renewable, we are looking to massive reductions in terms of the cost of energy. Suddenly, therefore, we have low-cost energy, and we have it in abundance. We have low-cost green energy, and we have it in abundance. We have the ability, because of that 2 miles, to join St. Kitts and Nevis in a single grid, and to do that quickly, and to scale up quickly. And so that is where we currently are in relation to this project. Now, if we have more power than we can use, it therefore means that we have a tremendous opportunities for investment in downstream uses. We're talking about green ammonia. We're talking about green hydrogen. We're talking about food processing, large data centers that may want large amounts of clean, green, cheap energy. All of those now become possibilities. We're talking about new jobs, leveraging new technologies, the ability to transform St. Kitts and Nevis from what it currently is to what we imagine it could be. And we imagine it could be that because we have now made, because of that political will, some significant strides in the last 2 years. We have secured some 17 million US dollars from the Caribbean Development Bank, largely from funds from the IDB, from the CDB, and from the Green Climate Fund. We have also recently, through diplomatic efforts, the Prime Minister and his team secured an additional 20 million US dollars from the Saudi Fund for Development. And I say thank you to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for coming through for us in very short time. In fact, interestingly enough, we have only in the last few years established diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia. But yet here they are, assisting us to bring this project to fruition. It perhaps bears out the age-old argument that you have heard even from this stage, that we in the Caribbean must definitely look south for our developmental needs. and the time for South cooperation is now. So with that 37 million US dollars that has been obtained, we are now well within striking distance to do the first phase of this project. And the first phase is to drill 3 production and 2 re-injection wells, 5 wells. The cost there is about $36 million. We're hoping it will be less, but that is estimated to be the cost. And that therefore will put us in a position where we can now move to the other phases of this project, which is to drill more wells, 1, but 2, to construct the plant, 3, to do the interconnectivity with St. Kitts, and 4, to power up the entire country from geothermal. Along the way, I think you here in Nigeria and the business people here, you have tremendous capacity and long years of experience in energy. I'm not sure how much experience in renewable energy, but nevertheless, you understand energy markets. And I believe that we can learn a lot from you in terms of your expertise. You can bring investment to bear to help us to harness and benefit from much of the downstream uses of this excess energy. So, with the potential for 1,000 megawatts or 1 gigawatt of power, it means that we'll power up every home, we'll power up every business, our tourism industry, which is still going to be important, but it will now be green. And I want you to imagine with me a St. Kitts and Nevis where our transportation sector is now green. Our buses, our motorcycles, our scooters, our hotels are entirely green. That is the future that we imagine. And that is the future, I think, that is within reach now that we have the will and now that we have some resources that are lined up in order to get us to where we need to go. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I anticipate that this will be transformational. That is the word that we have been using. It will be transformational because as we talk about a sustainable island state, we understand that energy security is important. We understand that as small islands in the Caribbean, notwithstanding that we are not involved, in fact, we are known as a zone of peace. We are not involved in any wars or any conflicts. That whenever there are conflicts elsewhere, our people pay higher prices. We pay higher prices for gasoline, we pay higher prices for electricity, we pay higher prices for basics such as bread because the price of oil goes up. And as the price of oil goes up, so does the cost of living go up. And so one of the things that we do with this project is that we insulate St. Kitts and Nevis from those exogenous shocks. We are no longer captive to what happens elsewhere. We're no longer captive to what happens in areas of the world over which we have no control. So we become self-sufficient in terms of energy. Low-cost green energy also means that one of the difficulties we've experienced as a small island state is water and our ability to keep up with the demand for fresh, potable water. And you may well ask in Nigeria, why are you having water problems? You're surrounded by ocean. That's the very definition of an island. We're surrounded by water. But, of course, desalination, making seawater portable, comes at a cost. That cost usually is electricity. At the high cost of electricity now, that type of process is arguably unworkable. But with low-cost geothermal energy, it now means that we can tap into the ocean to generate potable water. Cheaper energy, cleaner energy, therefore means cheaper water, desalinated water. Cheaper water means what? Our farmers need water to farm. It means that we can provide all of our farmers with more water and more access to potable water for their crops. Since water is a critical element of agriculture, the Minister of Agriculture is here, he'll be happy to hear that better, cheaper electricity means better, cheaper water means better, cheaper agriculture. I hope you see where I'm going because I'm ticking some boxes of sustainability. Energy sustainability, water sustainability, and importantly for our survival, food sustainability. And along that chain, and at every link of that chain, there will be opportunities for investment. And so again, Prime Minister, thank you. Smaina, thank you very much for having me. I have come from a little island a long way away to say what the Prime Minister said. He said it better than I could. but we are of Africa. We are African. And it is time that we recognize that we are very much part of the 6th region of Africa, that is Africans in the diaspora. A long time ago, there was the Middle Passage, which was one of grief. Let us recreate that Middle Passage now, but one of prosperity for our joint peoples. Thank you, and God bless you.